Ever find yourself waiting endlessly at a big box pharmacy, feeling like just another number? At Tablet Pharmacy, they provide the personalized service you deserve. They offer free delivery and blister packaging options to make managing your medications easier than ever. Check their competitive prices online at tabletpharmacy.ca.
Hello, friends. I am Cindy Thompson, and this is a Resilience Project. This is a space where stories are shared and possibilities are discovered. I invite you to partner with me in cultivating resilience among humans, one conversation at a time. It is not your struggle that defines you, but how you respond to it. This is the life mantra of Joe Bakhmoutski, whose cancer experience has taken him from the lowest depths of misery and pain to forge closer bonds with his family and making a greater impact out in the world with his books and podcast. Today, Joe has made it his mission in life to help those who have gone through cancer get on top of their worry and stress so they can feel calm, confident, and in control of their lives again. Speaking as a husband, father, author, and survivor of testicular cancer, Joe highlights some of the pivotal learnings and resilience practices that have given him hope for the future. All right, Joe, I am so pleased that we get to sit here and have a conversation today, you being in Melbourne, Australia, my being here on Vancouver Island, and how lovely that we get to have a conversation and hear your story today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for what you do with Resilience Project. I feel it's so critical, especially now in the times that we live in today.
Well, I'm hoping that together in having this conversation, we are going to help grow resilience among many. And I'm excited to hear more about your book that you've been writing, that you've just recently, I think, finished, to hear how that came about. So why don't we jump in to hear more, Joe, about your story, first of all, and maybe what led you to write the book?
Yes, thank you so much, Cindy. And I guess if I'm going to go back in time in a few years ago, I guess I was just in the shower one day. I was getting myself clean and so everything was normal. And my hand reached down and I felt this lump. I felt this lump on my testicle. And in that instant, I really felt like something's changed. I felt something was off and something was wrong. And I knew something has shifted. And I ran to the doctor the next day and things had happened quite quickly. Ran through all the tests. And, a little while later, I found myself in the urologist's office who sat me down. And I'll never forget when he said to me, "I'm sorry to have to tell this to you, Joe, but you have cancer." That's a moment when a lot of things have changed in my life. Cindy, because up to that moment, my life was the best that it's ever been. I was in the place where I was just a few years prior to that. I met the love of my life. We were married and when he was 2-year-old son. And so everything was going the right way. And then this thing kind of comes out of nowhere and hits you in the face. And that was just a moment where life has made a big turn for me,
And you often hear that it just comes out of the blue. You certainly wouldn't ever anticipate it, but you just find this lump and you hear that life changes in that very second.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that sometimes doesn't get enough attention, I feel, when you go through these changes, when you go through, especially when it's to do with health.
Yes.
Yes, it hasn't been, an easy journey. And, since I'm here, things have worked out well in the medical sense. I've had surgery, I had chemotherapy, and I was incredibly lucky that it kind of checked out. And I always say lucky because with these things, you never know how it's going to go. And there's so many people that were not as lucky as I am. So I fully appreciate it. But one thing that doesn't get enough attention that I feel, how it flips your life, how it affects you on not only how does health changes or traumatic events that go into your life, how they change people around you, how they change your relationships, how they change how you feel, even the way that you see yourself, because that becomes critical, and this really starts to shape you and takes your life in a totally different direction.
And a great chance to say, I need a resilience toolkit like right now, because like you're saying, when you're on that tilt-a-whirl ride and you don't know which direction you're going and where this is going to take you or how it's going to turn out, it takes a lot of trust, I would think.
Yes, absolutely. And I think resilience is so crucial because I really do believe that it's a skill, right? Oftentimes you get thrown into that and life just takes you on a roller coaster, if you will. And sometimes you kind of trying to stand your ground. And sometimes it works in the face of adversity, but sometimes you kind of learn it as you go. But I really do believe that we all have the capacity to learn this and get better at it and go into a place where you are able to stand your ground in the face of difficulties and challenges, but also sometimes that you are able to get up faster if you fall, as it also inevitably happens sometimes.
What did you already have in your resiliency practice that would have served you well at that time when you were first diagnosed and in the days to come?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I really realized, and this was a great realization for me, that something that I was already had at that point in time, is one of the challenges that I have experienced in my life was I've been living with anxiety and panic attacks for most of my life, really, since I was a teenager. And it hasn't been fun because for most of these years, I just thought I was a freak. I really didn't know what it was. These things would come over me. It would be triggered by something, by light or something that someone said. And I would go into this panic mode where I felt like I couldn't breathe. I would feel like I would just wanted to run away and hide. I would feel like I'm going to lose conscious, like I would just drop on the floor somewhere. It was just been horrific, right? Like, and for the longest time, I just thought I was weird. And I am weird. Like, so this besides the point. But I really didn't realize that this was something to do with mental health, and I didn't realize what it was. But over time, what I realized is one of the big things that's come out to serve me in my study, and especially when I came into cancer, was that I strongly believe that when you face your fear and when you bring it to light, it loses its grip on you. Mm-hmm. I've noticed with panic attacks and with anxiety is if you allow it to just kind of boil and simmer away at you, if you allowed something like this or any of those worry thoughts that we all have, any of those fears that are inevitable, that are going to come up for us in our lives, if we try to push it away, if you try to pretend like it's not there, it's not going to disappear. It's going to come in and it's going to take over your world. Mm-hmm. And I think it's so crucial to instead face this fear, not because you're brave, not for any particular reason, but because if you let it show up, and if you see it for what it is, it's going to at least be there on the sidelines, and it's not going to take over your life.
Excellent. Yeah, you're taking back your power by facing it, facing your worst fears.
Exactly right. That's exactly how it is.
Yeah. That anxiety that you have lived with, how did it inform you on how you get through hard things?
When I remember how I first came through understanding my anxiety in a really big, powerful way. I was on the beach one day and it was just a beautiful, quiet day. I was on this ocean beach. There was hardly anyone around. And it was the ocean side of the beach. So, and I was kind of more used to being in the bay. I came out onto this beautiful beach and I went into the water. And I was just really enjoying it. And the waters were just coming in and beautiful. And I was just lying on my back and drifting further out. And I wasn't that far away from the shore. And I suddenly noticed a change. I noticed something was happening. I didn't quite work out what it was. And I'll just got to go back to the shore. I tried to stand up and I couldn't stand. And I started to kind of get a little bit worried. I said, like, what's going on? And so I started to try to swim back. And what I noticed that I wasn't really moving. I wasn't able to get back to the shore. So I started to swim harder and nothing was happening. It's like there was this invisible wall around me. And at this point, I'm really freaking out and I'm really going for it. Like I'm just really going hard and nothing's happening. And at this point, I have waves coming in because storm is coming, right? And there's waves coming in. There's one just hitting me in the face, and my mouth is filled in with the salty water. And I start screaming, help, help, somebody help me. And at one point, something happened. Someone swoops in. That there was the surfer that came in. And he came in with the surfboard, and he put me on the board, and he somehow got me out of there. And I remember sitting on the sand. I was panting away and just trying to regain my senses. And he said to me, he said, the rip got you. It's the rip. It's this underwater current that really comes in. And if you just try to go against it, if you try to fight it, it's just going to pull you in. If you want to get through, you have to go sideways. You have to go with it. And that's how you get to the shore. And so that was a huge realization for me because I thought back on it when I was going through panic attacks and also when I was going through cancer. And I realized that I don't want to fight this thing. I don't want to fight the craziness. I don't want to fight this experience. I want to go with it. And for me, it really helped to be in a place when I was going through cancer. And I had no idea what was going on. It's like you land into this world. It's like you learn this different language, right? There's all these terms. There's all these different medical things that are going on and different people. And there's your whole medical team. And you're trying to figure out what's going on. And you have to choose between different treatments and all of those things that come in there. That's just completely mind-boggling. And what really helped me is to really go with it and to really immerse myself in this experience, understand the facts, figure out what's going on so that I can decide what's right for me and my life.
Wow. I love that metaphor. How amazing to describe it that way. And because that was a real lived experience, you really could relate to how that carried you out and if you let it consume you at first. But what a great learning. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that, but sometimes that's what life teaches us, is to give us a chance to think of it in a different way.
That's exactly right. And sometimes you don't ask for these experiences, but when they do happen, it certainly gives you a different appreciation of what life is and the challenges that we inevitably live with. We all are in a place where, I think in our culture, we have so much focus on success. We have so much focus on the times when things go right. And we forget about the times when things go wrong. And sometimes they go horribly wrong. And sometimes we have to live with those consequences. But we want to live better with them, right? We want to be in a place where it's not something that really kind of holds you back and makes your life even more challenging than it should be. But instead, maybe it's an experience which allows you to have a great appreciation of who you are and where you're going.
Yeah, well said. Do you think, Joe, that the cancer then helped you face another fear, helped you to really see where you could let go and trust others to help or trust the treatments? I'm curious what cancer has taught you also within that, even the anxiety stream.
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest things that cancer taught me was around support and how crucial that is. It's something that I always kept hearing from people is how incredible their support network has been. I'm going to go a little bit meta on this. Cindy, because for me, when I began my Simplify Cancer podcast, I remember the first interview that I had with a cancer survivor, because I was talking to a lot of experts as well. The first interview that I had with a cancer survivor, and it was with the lady I remember we met in the library for Zoom and everything else. And I asked her, so how did people around you respond? And she said, everyone was so amazing, and it really helped me pull through it. I remember saying to her, well, that's so great. I mean, I'm just so glad that you have such an amazing support, because to be honest, in some ways, it wasn't like that for me. There was, some people really didn't come through at all. And she was like, well, that was the case for me as well. But I just really didn't feel comfortable talking about it. And I go like, why not? And she goes, well, it's because what if this person's like listening to this? And it's become a fascinating theme, because I noticed I've been talking to hundreds of people on my podcast or in support groups or in hospitals. And it's a theme that keeps coming up. It's a huge problem that the people feel awkward talking about when people go through difficult times, whether they be cancer, whether they might be, whether that's losing someone, whether that's going through whatever challenges they might be facing in their life. It's a hugely difficult situation to admit to yourself that maybe sometimes you don't have the support that you need. And for me, I was lucky to have the incredible support of my wife, of my mom, but, it wasn't always like that. And I'll tell a story of how I remember I was in the hospital and I was in my ward. Like I was next to this guy who was my age, and the nurses put us together because he was in a similar boat. He was on the same cancer treatment, and he was just kind of a few cycles ahead of me. He had his family and his friends and all of his workmates coming to visit. And it was really cool. But my family, we lived kind of further out from the hospital and work and stuff. So my wife and my mom, they couldn't visit as much as probably would have liked. But I was looking at this guy, and I couldn't help but feel jealous. I was like, look at all of his friends, look at all of his workmates. And I was like, hold on a second, what's happening here? What about my friends? Because I did let them know that I was going to be in this hospital, right? They did know what's going on here. And why aren't they coming to visit me? And then I realized, it really hit me, because I realized, of course, this is a huge fancy hospital, right? They must be blocking the signal, right? So that it doesn't come through. That's why nobody's able to get through to my mobile phone. Of course, it makes sense. Why didn't I think of this earlier? So just to test my theory, I thought, well, why don't I call my mobile from a landline? So here I am, I'm walking out into the main ward. I was dragging my drip behind me. I was kind of stumbling in it like a zombie. And eventually I found the landline. So I dialed my mobile phone, but this weird thing happened. It lights up. It lights up and it starts playing its jingle,
Yes.
And so I look at it, and that's when I realized, it really hit me at this point, that nobody's coming. And it wasn't a good realization. It didn't feel good at all. And it took me a long time to process that and to deal with it in some way.
Yeah. Well, these are all learnings, because sometimes when we go through hard times, we realize who will be there for us, what level our friendship was or has been. And maybe it's been in certain settings. Maybe it's been more on a superficial level. And maybe it's because they're not sure how to support you. And maybe a reflection more on some of the friends and whether they were able to hold space for you.
That's so true. As you say, there's a couple of reasons for why it happens. Sometimes I feel people genuinely want to help, but they don't know how. And that's a critical piece as well. And again, I didn't realize this fully until it was happening. But I think it's so important to realize that there are always people who want to be there for you, but sometimes you need to guide them. And to be incredibly explicit about how that's going to look like and what you expect, because people don't want to feel awkward or stupid or insensitive. So sometimes people would rather say, nothing at all or do nothing at all, rather
Sure.
than just show up and just be themselves and be present and give, right? I think that's so crucial to sometimes guide people in just letting them know in what works for you and give people ability to pick and choose, because you're specifying exactly what you're going to need help with. You're spelling out what you expect people to do, so there's no misunderstanding, giving them all the tools to be there and support you. And I truly believe that people who truly care about you, like, they're going to be so grateful that you've done it, right? Because you've given them all the tools to really show up and be there for you in a big way. And the people who don't want to be there for you, they'll just step away.
Well, and Joe, it makes me think about vulnerability. In addition to that, I love the specificity of that. I love the way of guiding people to let them know how they can help. But also it takes a vulnerability to ask for help, where a lot of people are not that great at reaching out. They've always prided themselves on independence and managing it on their own, don't want to bother anybody. But it is a time, like you're saying, where it's lovely to have that support, and they may not even realize the benefit that would bring. So I love that you've highlighted it.
Thank you. But I also want to say that, and I think this is another point that helped me to think about it in this way, is that it's not only because you need this support, it's because it's important for people in your life. It's not about you. I feel like in many ways, it's about people around you. It's about your family and people you just kind of care. It's about your partner, maybe your closest friends. And sometimes, it's about thinking, well, how are they? Because if people who truly care about you, they're going to struggle. Mm-hmm. They're also not going to know what to say. They're not going to know what to do. Especially if it's, someone who's truly close to you, getting support and spelling out your needs is crucial, because it brings the people in your life in, and it lets them know how they can be there for you. Not necessarily because you need it. Sometimes you might not need to, but you do it for them.
Yeah, I love that, because we need to think about the family who are also impacted when somebody is really sick and is struggling with cancer or any illness. It is impacting the whole system, the whole family and close friends. So, Joe, you have been learning a lot about you, about what you need to get through these different challenges. And I can hear you've started a podcast around surviving cancer. You've also been doing some writing. Do you want to bring us to how writing has played a role in your healing process?
Absolutely. We'll go through challenges in our life. We go through this incredibly difficult experience in our life that we find so difficult to really make sense of, because you're not prepared for it. Nobody gives you a toolkit on what to do and how to behave and what is the right way to respond to these things. And I find that one of the biggest challenges that we have in our life when we go through challenges is not even knowing what to do, because that kind of is the next step, but it's how do you make sense of what's going on around you? And I feel that writing is an incredible way to get those thoughts, those emotions, those worries out of yourself. It's an incredible way, whether you do it in a less structured way, whether it's in a way that keep a diary, which I wish I have done, or whether you do it in a way where you do it through writing, like writing a blog or writing a book. But I believe that this is the one thing that every person should do in their life, especially if they've been through the struggle, is write a book. This book might be a memoir. This book might be, this in my case, self-help, or this might be a fiction book, but something that really can take your experience and use it in a way that will first of all, make sense to you. Because when you go through the process of writing, I find you discover incredible things about yourself. You find out so much more about you. And you find out that actually you are an interesting person. You have this fascinating experience. You have a story to tell, because we all do. Mm-hmm. It's not because I am like this. It's because we all do. We all have these fascinating stories to tell. And we can take these experiences that have been hurtful, that have been challenging, that have been tough, that threw you out, that pull you back, that really kind of strangle you and hold you. And when you shine a light on them, when you bring them out in a safe space, and what could be safer than it's you and the computer, and you're able to make sense of it, and you're able to go deep, and you have the knowledge that you can pull bits in, you can pull bits out, but you can find the stories, and you will notice things that you have never noticed in your life before. The story that I was telling you about dialing my mobile phone and how that changed, I didn't even realize like the full extent of it until I started writing it. It helped me connect with myself. For months, it didn't make sense. I went from just being frustrated and not knowing what it all meant to just being so angry. But writing it really also gave me this insight into some of those reasons. It gave me a perspective into what I want to do now. Okay, I went through this experience. I had most of my friends, they're not in my life. So what do I want to do now? Remember finding myself in this place, I was writing this story down. It made me able to think, well, what now? And I thought, well, this will never happen to me again. And I'm going to make sure that the people I do bring into my life are going to be people that connect with me and who I am. So I want to make sure that I know what my values are, and I kind of look towards that in people, so I can have friends that really are going to be there and support me and for who I am, not maybe who I like to be or who they would want me to be, but who I actually am. And it really helped me to connect with my personal deep beliefs and values, and helped me to not only realize what my past has been, but it's also allowed me to move forward.
It really speaks to life being an experiment, isn't it? Because we collect data along the way. We gather information, and even going through the cancer, realizing you didn't have many people showing up to support you at that time, that was a huge learning. And I can hear how you then took that. And of course, there's going to be really raw moments. And I appreciate the vulnerability and how you expressed that, Joe, because those are real. Those are those hard moments where we wake up and we go, okay, this is a hard truth. So what do I want to do about that? What now? I think that's a great question. What now? Which indicates there's more to this story. I'm not stopping here. I'm not going to let this crater me.
Yeah, that is so true. And I really love the analogy that you made, that it is an experiment. It is an experiment that you might not have it set up with endpoints and how you want it to look like, but you do absolutely collect the data along the way and see where it gets you. I think if you can get through a point in your struggle from a place where you feel lost and confused and miserable and not know what's going on, if you can get to a place where you can ask, what now? If you can get to a place where you can go, well, what do I do next? How do I deal with it? I think that is the best place to be, because this means that you are now taking charge of the situation and you're moving forward. And I think sometimes it feels so overwhelming, right? It feels like, especially if you're in a difficult spot, whether that's your business has gone under or whether you're sick, the challenge that you are going through and your world is just shifting and you're going through this difficult time. It feels like nothing makes sense and you don't know what to do. And it's vital. And I think in terms of resilience as well, is to think about it more in this context of what is the one thing I can do now? What is the one thing that you can do today? What's the one thing that I can do to just get through the day? What is the one step that I can make forward so that I can just feel a little bit better? Sometimes that's what's crucial. That one step every single day, that's going to make all the difference.
Then you're moving forward. Yes.
Exactly.
Joe, that seems like a beautiful segue to your book on hope. And when we first spoke, just in anticipation of this conversation, I really loved the part where you went and met with your grandmother. And I wonder if you would share that as to what inspired you then from that conversation to write your book on hope. It's a perfect thing for you to write about. It makes great sense to me that you would write about hope. But I love that part of the story. Would you share that?
Yes, absolutely. When this whole pandemic thing was breaking out, I remember just being in a state of panic, and I was going, what's going to happen? Because all of these big changes are starting to happen and you don't know which way it was going to go. And so I was talking on the phone to my grandma who is in Europe. And I said to her, it's so scary, this pandemic, the virus, what's going to happen? And she said to me, we went through a similar experience in my day. And what she told me about this typhus epidemic that happened in Soviet Union, and I had no idea about it because I read up on it later. It killed millions of people. I guess it would have been a pandemic if travel and stuff back in the day. So she told me about this time when she was a medical student. She is now 96 years old, an incredible person. But back then, this would have been in the 1930s, I do believe. She was 19 years old. She was a medical student. And because of this typhus epidemic, she was rushed to this mountain village away from her studies to really help people with containing the disease and helping them get through it. She was the only medical person in there. She had no training. She had no supplies. And she was completely unprepared, and she was just thrown in, and she nearly died. She was out for a couple of days. There was no food. And back then, the quarantine measures was they had Red Army guards around the village with a shoot-on-sight policy.
Oh, my.
It really made me appreciate the lockdowns we have today.
Yes.
It was a completely different experience. And I said to my grandma, how did you guys get through this? I mean, this was really rough. And she said, you know what? We had hope. We had hope that one day things would be different. We had hope that things would change. And it struck me so much, this idea of hope not as some kind of a relic of the days gone by or necessarily a religious thing, but hope as a feeling, hope, something that you can cling to, something that holds you in the toughest of times. And that's when I realized, hope is something that's really sustained me when I was going through cancer, when I was going through all these difficult times in my life, and I was dealing with panic attacks. I kind of went deep on my experience. I was like, I know a lot about hope, and I feel like it's really helped me to kind of find hope in difficult times, but also use hope in times where I wanted to have certain things in my life and use it towards goals and the ambitions that I have, but also to help and support others. And that's really became my decision to write this book, and what became Finding Hope in Times of Uncertainty, a guide to thriving in the challenging world of today. I spent the next 9 months writing this book, and I took everything that I've learned in the craziness of life.
Yes.
And how to really apply it in a way that can really serve you going through challenges in the lives that we inevitably face.
I love all that you're doing, whether it's your writing or the podcasts to help others. I can hear in your journey you've been learning so much. It's a lived experience as well. You're not just sitting behind a desk somewhere saying, in theory, these are really good things to try. I love that your grandmother would share that wisdom, that you could be learning from her, even her generation, of things they would have experienced and been through that feel super scary to us right now. But people have survived them in the past and have come through and have wisdom to share. So it also makes me think about learning from one another.
It's so true. And that's why it's so vital in what you are doing with a Resilience Project, because how we learn the most is we learn through stories. We learn through real life stories. Because when, for example, my story of losing friends through cancer, you don't necessarily think about me going through that experience, but it also can take you back to the time when someone wasn't there for you in your life, because we all go through that. And I think that is one of the tremendous powers of stories and how we connect and how we learn things about ourselves and about others and make sense of our experience is when we connect with other people's stories, because they help us to understand ourselves and the story that we are living right now.
Yeah, well said, Joe. I'm curious, maybe, is there one or two pieces from your book on hope that you might like to share with our listeners? Because I really want to give them a teaser so that they will actually go check out your book and read it.
Yeah, I really do believe, Cindy, that one of the biggest things in our lives is realization that our hope for a better life is the only thing that is really going to be stronger than fear. Because we experience sometimes debilitating fear that grabs hold of you because when you don't know what's going to happen. And to me, hope is really like a bridge between wish and expectation. Like you don't know what's going to happen, but you hope that there's a way out. You hope that there is a way to deal with it. And sometimes we cannot control what's going on. And that's why I think it's so crucial in our lives when we go through challenging times is to separate what you can and you cannot control. And I always say this in the book is why worry about all the things that could go wrong when there is so much that you can make right?
I love that. It's a great filter if you think about it that way. Like if we spent time on all those things, we'd be exhausted and we'd lose focus. You're helping us to really focus in on things right now today that could make a difference. It's some influence that we can have.
Yeah, that is exactly right. To focus on the things that we can control so that we can move forward on our own terms.
That's a great way to leave our listeners with something to reflect on and to think about today that could make a difference. So thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's been such a joy talking with you. You have lots of lived wisdom to share. And I'm so grateful that you are writing. I think you need to write. You've got a lot of really cool ways of explaining things. I can tell you reflect and think about how you can explain things to people. And that you could be on this podcast today sharing it with our listeners as well. I know you've got a lot to offer.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Cynthia. I truly appreciate it. Once again, thank you so much for what you do in the world with the Resilience Project. Now are the times where, we really need to be looking out for ourselves, because I really do feel that no one is more invested in your happiness, in your well-being and your way of life, really, than you are yourself. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, well, thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure. And I wish you all the best in your next projects that you might embrace.
Thank you so much for having me.
Joe is one of those people who has figured out what to do when life gives him lemons. I feel like his lemonade stand would have a great big sign that reads, "Find hope here." I respect the very raw yet genuine ways in which Joe reveals his story of living with anxiety and how these challenges may have prepared him to face some of the greatest and very real fears of his life. Drawing on the metaphor of swimming against the rip current, Joe reminded us that struggling against adversity results in exhaustion and a sense of helplessness. Embracing the practice of facing your fears, on the other hand, brings it to light and eventually allows it to lose its grip on you. When facing his initial cancer diagnosis, Joe found a way to immerse himself in the experience, listening to the medical advice, and to weigh out the possible recommended treatment options. Joe also touched on a very important theme that is showing up among many of my guests, and that is the value of support. Identifying the value of having people in your life who will be willing to show up when you need it. Joe also reminded us that it is also about supporting your immediate family or spouse as well. Often people are not sure how to help, which suggests guiding them on what you need and your family might benefit from at this time just takes the guesswork out of it. Finally, I loved the image of hope being a bridge between your wishes and expectations. We may not know what is going to happen next, but you can always look for a way through it. If we are not consumed by all that could go wrong, we leave room to discover what could go right. What hopes do you hold for your future? What evidence can you find in your life right now that suggests your hopes could become a reality? I invite you to start focusing on those aspects of your life that you can change or influence, letting go of those aspects that you do not have any control over. Dig deep, because you might be surprised by the number of things you actually do have control or influence over. In doing this, you are being proactive. Write down what it is that you would like to focus on. And I want you to let me know how this experiment goes. What evidence will you collect over time that things are actually beginning to shift? Finally, my friends, I just wanted to plant a seed that I will be taking a couple of weeks off in August to give our team a much-needed rest. We will be returning to our regular weekly episode releases in September. I hope that you too are planning for a time of rest this summer. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Resilience Project. We would not be doing this podcast without you. If you or someone you know has an inspirational story or is helping to build resilience in their community, please email me at cindy@aresilienceproject.com. In fact, email me either way. I would love to hear from you. My hope is to feature an episode periodically on your letters of resilience. I'm very interested in hearing your story of how you have tackled hard things and what worked for you. With your permission, I hope to share some of these stories along the way with our listeners. Also, check out my website, aresilienceproject.com, to learn more about our amazing guests. Your presence here is important because together we are cultivating a village of resilient individuals. You are creating a space for their stories to be shared and a sacred space for learning to occur. I also have a favor. I would love for you to go to your preferred podcast platform, rate and review the podcast so that we will know how we're doing. I also would like to express my gratitude to the amazing team of volunteers that have jumped on board to support this project. You will find each of those beautiful people on my website on the team page. As you go about this week, I invite you to think about one way that you can continue to grow your resilient muscle. What is one thing you can start with today? See you next week.
Ever find yourself waiting endlessly at a big box pharmacy, feeling like just another number? At Tablet Pharmacy, they provide the personalized service you deserve. They offer free delivery and blister packaging options to make managing your medications easier than ever. Check their competitive prices online at tabletpharmacy.ca